4 games, 1 story. A statement provided to us directly from Scott Cawthon in 2015 following the start of the FNaF World teasers that no one has solved. Not even MatPat had a clue on what this one story was from these first 4 games. Five Nights at Freddy's has been leaving fans shrouded in mystery since 2014, and despite the amount of theories, lore hunts, and overanalyzing of this franchise, many agree on one thing: Scott Cawthon's games remain unsolved, and some major moments remain hidden in obscurity as the fan base has moved on to new ventures within FNaF. That is, until today. As to understand a lot of FNaF, we have to understand what Scott's original vision for the first 4 games were that tell a story of the mental insanity that makes your fears come to life due to the exploitation of life from a madman that caused multiple children to go missing with no trace. Before we get into all the games, we have to set up the story for these original games, and it all starts back in 1973 with the start of William Afton and Edwin Murray's collaboration with the Fazbear Project. First, however, we have to explain Edwin Murray and his descent from success. Edwin Murray was a man happily married to his wife, Fiona Murray, who he met through the Murray Costume Manor when he was just an employee under his father, Edwin Murray Sr. Edwin Murray Jr. would end up taking over the Costume Manor after his father passed away to unknown circumstances in 1968. Due to this graph we can see in Secret the Mimic that shows a major dip around this time and an audio log detailing Edwin Murray Sr.'s passing. Quote,
"Ed, honey, how are you holding up? I just heard the news."
I don't know. This is all so much. He's gone. He's gone, and now everyone is asking me what to do? And I don't know anything. I can't run a company. I'm not ready. I can't fill his shoes. He knew it. Everyone knew it. The company's gonna collapse and they're all going to hate me.
Ed, you'll figure it out. Just take a deep breath. It's your company now. Your dad believed in you. Otherwise, he wouldn't have left it to you.
I guess so.
If you could change anything you wanted, what would it be?
Maybe rebrand? We could start making some of my inventions for real.
Bringing us back to the graph, this will be giving our answers throughout this, so don't forget it. After Edwin Sr.'s death, we could see that Edwin Jr. struggled for about a year in 1968, but found his footing in 1969, and the business started to do way better than it ever did with Edwin Jr.'s father in charge. And with this success, Edwin and Fiona would have David Murray, born on December 5th, 1970, with a genetic disease called heterochromia, where in David's case made one eye colored blue and the other green. The business was highly successful, and with this, Edwin would become way too attached to his work, to the point of not attending David's birthday parties and only caring about inventing new items. And this did work in the favor of Edwin, as with the release of the Cleanovac, Edwin saw a huge spike in profits, and with that became more engrossed in his work, creating items such as the Stay Up Latte, a coffee machine using Mimic technology to know your favorite coffee and when to make it before you know you even want it, amongst other items such as Jess cereal, a coat rack, and more. However, in 1972, a lot of these products would become faulty, and thus a lot of items were returned, and Edwin would see his first major dip in his tenure at MCM. But another company wanted help with a major project that I'm calling the Springlock Project in 1972 from Fazbear Entertainment for Edwin to create new Springlock costumes for Fazbear Entertainment, a company Edwin has worked with previously before the Springlock Project, due to Edwin mentioning that he has done previous projects for Fazbear Entertainment before this said project. Quote,
"This is the last project I ever do for them."
And working with Edwin would have Fiona working on the designs, and Edwin making the new Springlock suits. However, about halfway into 1973, Fazbear Entertainment made a major switch in this project, rejecting Fiona's designs altogether at the last minute and giving new designs that Edwin dubs as creepier designs. Fiona's designs were most likely the 4 prototype suits we see in research and development, being Fredbear, Spring Bonnie, Bub, and Monty, with these new creepier designs being the classic 4 animatronics from FNaF 1, as we see it being worked on in the research and development area. This switch gave MCM an insane spike in funds, and thus profits for this time, and a lot of that funding wouldn't go to just making the FNaF 1 classics, but into designing the pizzeria they would be in and making a model recreation of it. This amount of intense work enraged Edwin, with Edwin saying he would get this project done and never ever work with Fazbear Entertainment again. Edwin and Fiona worked on this project for about a year until in the later half of 1973. Fiona died at Fall Fest 73 in an unknown accident that is heavily implied to be fire related that'll play a big part in finding out about this first Friday's location. Once Edwin was on the back pedal and going insane, Fazbear Entertainment had a hostile takeover of MCM, having employees steal blueprints, offering franchise deals, and more to the employees who betrayed MCM due to the hostile work environment created by Edwin, forcing workers to work over 100 hours in a week at some points. During this, Edwin would continue work but also create the M1, and it would later mimic Fiona, now acting as the motherly stand-in for David, while Edwin worked on this project without Fiona shown to us through multiple audio logs and Secret of the Mimic. However, on David's 5th birthday on Saturday, December 5th, 1975, he tragically died in an unknown way. We are able to confirm it was on December 5th, and more specifically a Saturday, due to 2 logs from the admin wing where they were staying up for his birthday.
Admin, December 1st, 8 a.m. Attention, we're gonna need everyone to come in this weekend. This is not optional. The party is on Saturday in the admin conference room 1. Don't tell David, it's a surprise.
To all admin staff members, Mr. Murray's party has been cancelled due to the recent tragic events. Please do not enter the conference room until further notice.
Edwin would go insane after this, with him putting M1 into the F10 and 4 machine and creating M2 that would go on to mimic David, with this later infuriating him to destroy M2 by breaking his legs off and teaching it violence and rage. M2 would later enact revenge by blowing up Edwin's home office and by proxy ruining Edwin's legs in an ironic way of revenge. Edwin would go missing, and over the course of the next 4 years, Fazbear Entertainment would send multiple teams to retrieve their property and the mimic blueprints, leading to Secret of the Mimic. Now, let's rewind a little bit and take a look at what we know about this 1973 location and how it led to this insane takeover of the Murray Costume Manor. We could trace this location to at least 1973 for a few reasons. And first, we have to talk about the possibility of a location existing before the 1983 location that we see in ruin through these coins. However, we have 2 instances of a Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria existing before this. The first coming from the Silver Ice book, where Charlie was killed at a Freddy's in 1982, a whole year before the 1983 Freddy's. And this is doubled down on in the Freddy files, where it also tells us that Charlie was reported as missing on November 1st, 1982, and later tripled down in the FNaF 2 movie, the most recent case of Charlie's death, be told to us with it also being in 1982, as told to us in the beginning of the movie, as we follow Charlie try to save a kid from William Afton, which gives us not just 1, but 2 cases where Charlie dies at Freddy's in 1982, and there just being a Freddy's that existed before this 1983 location were shown in ruin. However, this isn't the only piece of evidence for this location from the FNaF 2 movie, as one of the most peculiar scenes in this movie is when Vanessa uses Mike's dream theory methods to deal with trauma. And in this scene, we see Vanessa run from William and run into his workshop. In this workshop, we could find some toy animatronic parts and some blueprints for the next Freddy Fazbear's Pizza animatronics. And fellow theorist Freddy pointed out to me that there are specifically 3 we could see: Toy Bonnie, Toy Chica, and FNaF 1 Freddy Fazbear. But yet again, Freddy pointed out to me that Freddy has a band on his hat, something only featured on Toy Freddy himself, and not FNaF 1 Freddy. When you look further into this blueprint, it says that this is the 3.0 version of Freddy Fazbear, meaning that there were 2 versions before him. But what are these 3 versions in the games? Well, let's first work from the 1.0s upwards, and we could start with their possible first appearance in the timeline in 1973 at the Fall Fest Fire in Help Wanted 2. In the carousel minigame, you are repairing a carousel while Moon haunts you, and on hard mode, it's burning down. However, on this, we could find the toy animatronic designs, Balloon Boy, and the classic animatronics all on here, giving us 2 different possibilities for the 1.0 animatronics. And we can start to narrow down on which group is the original 1.0 animatronics through a few sources. Our first source comes from FNaF 3 with drawings from the FNaF 2 location that we actually don't see in FNaF 2, making these drawings unaccounted for unless we decide to go back before 1987. And we get this hint from our second source being the survival logbook, with One Spirit asking CC on page 56, quote, "Is your favorite ride the carousel?" And with CC dying in 1983, we only know of 1 location up to the point of the logbook where a carousel would be relevant, and that has left a huge wrench in this book. This location being the FNaF 2 location, meaning that CC would have gone to the FNaF 2 location before his death in 1983, which should be impossible due to the opening of the location being in 1987, unless the reopening wasn't a reopening for the 1985 location. Instead, it was a location before any franchise locations were opened, a direct line given to us from the FNaF 2 movie. The FNaF 2 location isn't the FNaF 1 franchise location, it was the original, with the other piece of evidence being that these 1.0 suits need to be spring locks, as a switch to non-spring lock suits did not happen until after the 2.0s were scrapped. And again, in the FNaF 2 movie, we see that Toy Chica is a spring lock suit, whereas in Secret of the Mimic, we see the classics with their non-spring lock Endo 01 endoskeletons, meaning that our 1.0s are more than likely the toy animatronics, just not upgraded yet, as that comes much later in the timeline, where it's called out by Ralph that these animatronics have new technology in 1987, making the 1987 toys a quote-unquote 4.0 line. We can also piece together when the FNaF 2 location originally closed, being in 1982 due to Charlie's death, something that happens in the FNaF 2 movie after, despite Fazbear Entertainment trying their best to cover it up and say that it was Charlie's fault for going into a restricted area, giving us about a year for the 1983 location to open with the classics. Then we have to talk about the 2.0s, and we don't have much information on them other than they use Fiona's designs as told us in an audio log from Edwin that's found in the mock-up safe room in R&D that says, quote,
Are they insane? The look of these new animatronics is Fiona's design, and they're great. First they approve the art, then they approve the proofs, now they change their minds when we're so close to final. Why would they change them now? Are they pulling my leg? The new concepts are frankly creepy. It doesn't matter. I'm not changing a single bit of her work, and they can't make me.
And they have to be spring locked due to another audio log from Edwin found in the mock-up women's restroom in R&D that says, quote,
Test, journal entry. I got the change order from Hen last night. None of this makes sense. I'm almost done. Why change it now? It would be so much easier to keep using the spring locks. Just hire some teens to wear the suits, like we always do.
With further information that what came before the 3.0s and the FNaF 2 movie were scrapped prototypes that were later used for parts, and with the audio logs coming from R&D, where there's 4 spring lock suits of Bub, Monty, Fredbear, and Spring Bonnie, with Bub and Monty being borderline finished, with Fredbear and Spring Bonnie and their painting and final touches phase. We can conclude these are our 2.0s, as to back it up even further, we can find that on the back of Fredbear and Spring Bonnie's heads, the word prototype is sprawled on the back of Fredbear's head and on the back of Spring Bonnie's head as well, which then leads us to our only other candidates for the 3.0s, the prototype classics in R&D being our third wave of animatronics that would later go on to be used for scrap after the closure of the 1985 location. Though there's a piece of real world information we could actually use to help us piece together the previous location from before 1983 due to the help from J-Top. So Chuck E. Cheese has been referenced in more recent FNaF games, and to establish our connection to this coin, we have to talk about these connections, and the first one starts with this duffel bag message from Security Breach titled Recycled Pizza, which is a customer complaining about the pizza slices being multiple different sizes, and thus the customer thinking they are recycled pieces of pizza. Quote,
The pizza we ordered was weird. Some pieces were different sizes or didn't fit together. One slice even had different toppings. Did you recycle the old pizza from the trash? I am never coming back here unless I am given some sort of major discount.
Which is a reference to the real-world controversy Chuck E. Cheese faced, where people generally thought that any leftover pizza was being reused in other people's pizzas to cut costs. And the Chuck E. Cheese connections don't stop here, as J-Top himself says the 80s theming for FNaF Security Breach is due to his love and attachment to the 80s Chuck E. Cheese's aesthetic.
I was one of those kids that in the 80s, when, you know, the original Chuck E. Cheese's opened, every single party we had was at Chuck E. Cheese. It was this cool 2-story one. I was telling Scott about it,
damn.
you know, and I always had all that stuck in my head, you know, forever. Really wanted to hit that feel.
When looking at this coin, friend brought up to me that Chuck E. Cheese coins had the year they were given out. So if you had a Chuck E. Cheese coin from 1999, it'd say 1999 with the mascot at the time. Whereas a coin from the 2010s would say a year like 2010 with the mascot at the time. So let's quickly recap what we just established. Our FNaF timeline starts at the earliest in 1965 from this graph we could find in Secret of the Mimic, with Edwin Murray Sr. running the Murray Costume Manor with his son Edwin Murray Jr. working beneath him. Later, Edwin meets Fiona between the years of 1965 and 1968, and they talk for a few years until Edwin Murray Sr. passes away due to unknown circumstances in 1968, as seen in the graph showing a major dip around this time, leaving the company to Edwin Murray Jr. Edwin would go into business with Fazbear Entertainment despite warnings from his father to never work with Fazbear Entertainment, because Edwin Sr. knew that Fazbear Entertainment wanted to destroy MCM, as shown to us in the audio log titled Trust No One. Edwin Jr. would later marry Fiona, and in 1970 would have their first and only only child, David Murray, on December 5th, shown to us in the admin logs for David's 5th birthday being on December 5th, and David's death occurring past what this graph shows us. And after this, the business began to boom with the new mimic technology Edwin created for everyday items such as the Stay Up Latte, and things were looking up for Edwin and his new family. Fazbear Entertainment then commissioned the Murray costume manor for new 2.0 suits that Fiona would design and Ed would make come to life through new spring-lock technology. Later on, Fazbear Entertainment was happy with these designs and business seemed great for Edwin. That was until 1973, where the Murray costume manor and Fazbear Entertainment both attended Fall Fest, with Fazbear Entertainment showing off the designs for the 1.0 characters through a carousel and MCM being there to show off something unknown to us at the current moment. During this, a fire started that ended up burning everything down, would also claim the life of Fiona Murray. By this point, the M1 endoskeleton, standing for Mimic 1, was created, and would go on to mimic Fiona and become the new stand-in mother for David Murray and wife for Edwin. During the past 3 years before Fiona's death, Edwin was beyond sucked into his work and wouldn't even attend David's birthday parties, leaving it to Fiona to plan everything for David. So now, with Fiona gone, Edwin became more of a father, but far from perfect. Still sucked into his work, leaving David with M1 most of the time, despite David seeing M1 as scary. But Edwin didn't care and continued work on this project until around the beginning of 1973. Fazbear Entertainment rejected the new costumes last minute and wanted new designs along with a whole mock-up pizzeria to be made underneath the costume manor, as shown to us in the graph and within the research and development area in Secret of the Mimic. This infuriated Edwin, and at first, Edwin didn't want to do this for them, but eventually did what Fazbear Entertainment wanted and vowed that this would be the last project Edwin ever does for Fazbear Entertainment. During this, William Afton would encourage employees to jump ship, steal blueprints, and offer them franchise deals if they did so, slowly killing the Murray costume manor from 1973 to 1975, with the last straw for Edwin being his son's David Murray's death on December 5th, 1975. As shown to us in those two admin logs from earlier, Edwin would go on to create another mimic called M2 and moved M1 to the F10 and 4 machine after M1 kept telling Edwin to make another. M2 would go on to mimic David Murray. However, this quickly enraged Edwin and he destroyed M2 as a result, dismantling its legs. However, this would come back to bite Edwin, as in a bittersweet revenge moment, M2 blows up Edwin's home office, immobilizing Edwin's legs. With the company dying and Edwin out of the picture, Fazbear Entertainment would send multiple teams to retrieve their property and the blueprints for the mimic. However, they would all die to M2 until an overworked Arnold was dispatched to the costume manor to retrieve the mimic blueprints and property of Fazbear Entertainment. And Arnold did succeed until he had to escape, in which M2 catches up to Arnold and crashes his van as he speeds away from the burning MCM building, leaving M2 to get the blueprints from the data diver and leaving Arnold in a burning van. Using the evidence of there being 3.0s, we can conclude the 1.0s are a project that Fazbear Entertainment and MCM worked on before the 2.0s that we do not see, but are most likely the toy animatronics, just without their fancy FNaF 2 4.0 upgrades, with the 2.0s being Fiona's designs of Fredbear, Spring Bonnie, Monty, and Bub that were scrapped as prototypes despite them almost being done, and more prototypes of the new creepier designs being the classics as the 3.0 designs, which leads us into our first major event within this franchise that will change the course of many lives for decades to come. The year is 1983. It is 5 days before the party and you are a small, fragile, crying child locked in his room by his older brother. In this room are a bed, a nightstand, and 5 plushies, 4 in one corner and the final 5th one on the bed. Interestingly, Foxy is in the corner with the other 3 main band members of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. However, his head is ripped off, and the plushie on the bed, Fredbear, has blacked out eyes with white pupils that follow you throughout the room. Fredbear asks you,
"What did he do this time?"
You then bang on the door relentlessly, a worthless attempt of being let out. However, no one comes. You collapse in tears, and Fredbear has only one thing to say to you.
"Tomorrow is another day."
The day ends, and indeed, tomorrow is another day, 4 days before the party. You wake up in your room again. However, the door is unlocked, and Fredbear gives us a warning before leaving.
"You know he is hiding again."
You walk out of your room, aware your brother is going to do another one of his dumb pranks on you, and Fredbear is here to watch, watching you walk towards your inevitable scare, first from the grandfather clock right outside your room, then into the living room on the couch, still watching you as you walk over to the TV. Your brother jumps out from behind the TV with that creepy Foxy mask, and you collapse in tears yet again, and Fredbear tells us,
"Tomorrow is another day."
And again, tomorrow is another day, 3 days before the party. You're at Fredbear's family diner, the one place you are deathly afraid of, and you have been abandoned by your brother, who is supposed to be watching you, leaving you crying under the table. But you haven't been abandoned by your best friend, your Fredbear plush.
"He left without you. He knows that you hate it here. You're right beside the exit. If you run, you can make it. Hurry, run towards the exit."
With these words of encouragement, you get up from underneath the table and you run the wrong way, and your plushie warns you.
No, don't you remember what you saw? The exit is the other way. Hurry and leave.
And with this warning, you turn the other way and try to leave, but you are blocked off by your worst nightmare. The big, towering Fredbear animatronic with a man inside it, and your Fredbear plush panics with you.
It's too late. Hurry the other way and find someone who will help you. You know what will happen if he catches you.
You don't hesitate to run the other direction again, despite your plush's initial warning, and your plush is aware that you're going somewhere it doesn't want you going.
You can find help if you get past them. You have to be strong.
However, something catches your eye, and you peek back to where that man in the Fredbear suit is, and you notice a figure stuffing a man into the Spring Bonnie animatronic behind 5 distinctly colored balloons. You watch silently, but eventually the man hidden in the shadows slams the doors in your face, and you now have no choice but to continue running towards the stage. As you walk towards the stage, the man in the Fredbear suit blocks your way out further and causes you to collapse in tears yet again underneath another table, just further into your nightmare. And of course, tomorrow is another day. 2 days until the party. You're back at Fredbear's again, and of course, abandoned by your brother, and your plush is aware that your brother doesn't really like you.
He hates you. You have to get up. You can get out this time, but you have to hurry.
With the fear of last time, you don't hesitate to get up and leave immediately. You leave the building and go out into the parking lot, and your plushie isn't far, watching you with cold black eyes from behind a green car. You see another kid nearby and decide to go talk to her.
Where's your plush toy? Mine is Spring Bonnie. My daddy says I have to be careful with him or I will pinch my finger. He is a finger trap, he says.
And with nothing to say back, you walk away, exiting the parking lot and start to make your way back home. And on your way, your plush follows you and watches with cold black eyes, just his head on top of a flower. You see another kid and you decide to talk to her.
You'd better watch out. I hear they come to life at night, and if you die, they hide your body and never tell anyone. Why do you look so worried? See you at the party.
She was right. You were scared, and you walked off, your plush still following. Watching with his cold black eyes from the sewer grate, you spot your brother's friend laughing, and you decide to talk to him.
Aren't you the kid who always hides under the table and cries? No one else is scared. Why are you? Stop being such a baby.
With the feeling of defeat, you walk away closer to home, and for a little while, your plush isn't seen anywhere near you, but you see another kid right outside your home playing with some toys. Chica was missing her beak, and Fredbear was watching, but his eyes were lit up with those white pupils again. You decide to talk to her and see what's up with her toys.
Why are you crying? Don't you like my toy collection?
With nothing to say back, you walk further home and you see your plush again. Not his eyes, but his foot behind a car's tire. Further ahead, you see another kid holding a balloon and you talk to him.
Are you going to the party? Everyone is going to the party. Oh wait, you have to go. It's your birthday.
Right, it is your party in 2 days. You walk off again and see your plush again with its cold, black eyes staring from behind a flower. You ignore it and walk forward to your house, and he's there, weighing with his cold black eyes on a flower again. Just his head, no body, and nothing to say. As you walk into your home, you hear laughter, and your plush is still on the couch watching you with a message.
Be careful.
You wait a little bit before you go to your room, and suddenly the TV turns on with Fredbear's show, Fredbear and Friends, 1983. You see Fredbear and Foxy together, and a light blue Bonnie plays his guitar, Chica has her cupcake as usual, and Freddy is singing. The show repeats and you walk towards your room, but you notice that the room next to yours is open, and you decide to look. Your plush is already there, waiting for you, and the room is pink, decorated similar to yours with a pink bed and a nightstand. However, there's a flower with 5 distinct petals on it, and on the floor is a destroyed pink Foxy. Confused, you decide to go to your room, and your brother jumps out from under your bed with that stupid Foxy mask again. Your plush giving you the same words as any other day.
Tomorrow is another day.
And it was another day closer to your party. 1 day until the party. This time your brother locked you in the parts and service room, filled with creepy animatronic parts, and your plushy friend is nowhere near to help you. You can hear your brother laughing on the other side of the door. You beg to be let out.
Please let me out. Please. Please let me out.
You give up, collapse on the floor, and cry again. You wait for the day to be over. However, today's your birthday, your party, and you wish it was the next day already. You're at Fredbear's family diner, your party all ready with your brother and his 3 friends surrounding you, and creepy masks of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria mascots. Your brother's friend in the Chica mask speaks to your brother first.
Wow, your brother's kind of a baby, isn't it?
Then your brother.
It's hilarious. Why don't we help him get a closer look? You will love it.
You beg not to be dragged closer to them.
No, please.
However, this feeds into your brother's delusion.
Come on, guys. Let's give this little man a lift. He wants to get up close and personal.
Together, against your will, are picked up by your brother and his friends, slowly being carried over to the stage, the whole time trying to fight out of their grasp, and you beg the whole way.
No, I don't want to go.
A fellow patron sees this and yells at your brother and friends.
Hey, stop that! Put him down! Get back from the stage! Do not touch the bear!
However, they ignore this, and your brother uses your words against you.
You heard the little man. He wants to get even closer.
More patrons start shouting and screaming at your brother and friends to no avail.
Hey guys, I think the little man said he wants to give Fredbear a big kiss. On 3. 1, 2...
And on 3, you give Fredbear more than just a kiss. You are lifted directly into his mouth. You panic and slowly feel the pressure from the jaws on Fredbear get tight. Tighter, yet tighter. And you feel your skull give way. Your head is crushed and you instantly go unconscious. No longer moving, the prank is over, and so's laughter of your brother and his 3 friends. Everyone just stares. Everything fades to black, and you wake up in a void with your plushies, your Fredbear plush front and center to you. You hear a familiar voice. It's your brother.
Can you hear me? I don't know if you can hear me. I'm sorry.
Then your plush talks to you again.
You're broken.
Your headless Foxy plush fades away.
We are still your friends.
Your Chica plush fades away.
Do you still believe that?
Your Bonnie plush fades away.
I'm still here.
Your Freddy plush fades away.
I will put you back together.
Then Fredbear fades away, leaving you all alone. You sit for a moment, crying harder than you ever had in your life, or I guess death. Then you fade away, with the sound of a flatline following you fading away, and so does the spotlight that was on you. So you're probably wondering why I just showed you all that without explaining a thing, especially when I point out weird details that don't make sense right now. It's because this minigame has a lot of explaining to do, so let's get into it. As described, we play as a crying child who is bullied by his older brother and is eventually killed by being bit by Fredbear, and as much as I hate to say it, right now, this isn't the most important detail of this minigame. The most important details are the Easter eggs we see throughout these minigames, and as you might have noticed, I pointed out 3 animatronics throughout this, being the Chica toy without a beak, a broken pink Foxy on the floor, and a light blue Bonnie on the TV, and without context, these are a weird selection of sprites to pick from. However, when combined, I feel they tell a compelling story that Scott Cawthon tried telling us years ago, back when people were highly confused about FNaF 4 and its story. On a GT Live livestream on October 9th, 2015, YouTubers MattPat, Dawko, Razbowski, 8-Bit Ryan, and Smike came together to theorize to try and solve FNaF when the start of the FNaF World teasers were being posted to scottgames.com. About an hour and 15 minutes into the stream, Scott Cawthon posted one of 3 possible teasers, the first of which asking, in the FNaF 4 minigame, why would the tiny toy Chica be missing her beak, drawing direct attention to this toy, and FNaF 4 missing her beak, which should be directly telling us that this is a toy of Toy Chica, the only Chica who we know of that can remove her beak at will, and at this point, people were already talking about why the pink Foxy, who would be Mangle, was laying in the house of the crying child, but not put together, and I think the answer lies in what we already established previously. The toy animatronics existed before the 1987 location, and the grand reopening wasn't a reopening of the 1985 Freddy's location, but rather the original location that would have closed in 1982 due to Charlie's death, directly tying this 1982 location to Charlie's death as it had the toys at the time, completely changing what we thought about FNaF 2 and its history in the first place by showing us Toy Chica, Mangle, and that light blue Bonnie being Toy Bonnie, which makes this 3 instances of the toys appearing in FNaF 4, meaning they existed in some capacity before Crying Child's death in 1983. We can now move on to the next teaser that says, what is seen in the shadows is easily misunderstood in the mind of a child. And this doesn't directly call out any one specific moment, but it is from FNaF 4. And as I'll explain the nighttime gameplay later, as I don't believe it's there, so it had to be within these minigames. And in terms of shadows, well, only 2 things happen in the shadows. Purple guy putting another employee into the spring Bonnie suit, and the Fredbear plush hiding in the sewer grate. And we have to narrow down what this could have been, and I think the answer lies within one child in these minigames. The pigtail girl who had this to say to us when we spoke to her.
You'd better watch out. I hear they come to life at night, and if you die, they hide your body and never tell anyone. Why do you look so worried? See you at the party.
And we have another instance of being stuffed into a suit being referenced as previously mentioned. Purple guy stuffing another employee into a suit. So we have one kid referencing something that happens in the shadows seen in a previous night, and it has to do with something that the crying child saw that involved Fredbear, as he is the most afraid of the Fredbear animatronic specifically. I think that what this thing crying child saw in the dark that he misunderstood was just simply a case of the employees accidentally showing a little too much of the behind the scenes to the patrons by accidentally leaving the doors open to the suiting rooms for the spring locks. We could back it up further in the FNaF 4 night gameplay, as during the gameplay there's an Easter egg that can pop up. That's a FNaF 1 night 1 phone call where it mentions the bite of 87 and that you may be stuffed into a Freddy suit if the animatronics catch you. Another instance of the stuffing of a human body into an animatronic suit is mentioned to us in FNaF 4. And if we decide to use future evidence of a rumor starting, look no further than 1979 with Secret of the Mimic, where the Mimic literally stuffs his victims into costumes, thus helping us draw that the stuffing the bodies into animatronic suits trope may have originally started as a rumor that became reality later on once the animatronics were possessed by the spirits of the children who died in the MCI and stuffed into their subsequent suits. Then the last teaser, 4 games, 1 story. This is pretty straightforward, telling us that FNaF 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all one story that can be solved. And I feel that at this point in the story, Scott Cawthon wasn't lying. And before we move on from these minigames, there's actually another part to this story that I need to explain, and it's actually the 8-bit style of sections you'll see pop up throughout this video. From FNaF 2, 3, and 4, we can play a various amount of 8-bit styled minigames that take place to tell us important lore tidbits for the story of these games, typically detailing the murders or the Happiest Day event, and in our case for FNaF 4, the bite of 83. And there's a reason they're all 8-bit. They're actual arcade machines. But if this is 4 games, 1 story, how can we get to this conclusion besides an artistic style choice that Scott chose after the success of the first game? Well, it's actually shown to us 2 different times in FNaF 3 with respectively different levels of obviousness to the player. The lesser of the 2 is Phantom Chica's mechanic, where in order for her to attack you, the player have to look at camera 7, and she has a chance to appear with her full face covering the arcade screen before appearing in front of you and jump scaring you. However, this next one literally shoves it in your face so much, and it directly correlates to Happiest Day itself. In order to get Mangle's quest, you have to go to camera 7 and put into the buttons on the left side of the arcade machine a code that is top left, top right, bottom right, and then it directly takes you to Mangle's quest, a direct connection between arcade machines and these mini games. And his Happiest Day and its subsequent mini games that help build up with this big event has a strong connection to the spirits within this franchise, and there's another place we can look to in order to confirm that these machines that depict things that normally wouldn't be depicted are being controlled by ghostly spirits. In the Ticket to Fun ephemera kit, we can use our blacklight to find multiple different Easter eggs hidden throughout this kit, each of which have been made by the spirits, and one of them directly calls out a mini game that depicts a murder in a later entry in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. In FFPS, we could play the security puppet minigame 3 times, where we play as a security puppet looking out for a kid with a green bracelet. However, on the 3rd time, we are trapped in our gift box by more gift boxes, and outside we can see Charlie trying to get back in. However, she fades away into the night, and the security puppet breaks out of his trap and goes outside to find Charlie dead next to some trash cans, followed by some tire marks. The security puppet, now broken from the rain, lays down next to Charlie, and the mini game ends. And now if we go back to take a look at Ticket to Fun, we can find a blacklight drawing of Charlie in 8-bit outside of the window in the security puppet minigame, directly on the page with the catchphrase of Toy Chica's "Let's Party," a direct call out to Charlie dying at a location with Toy Chica, and these minigames being actual arcade machines that are possessed by the spirits to tell their story of their past scene, which continues in the same game with Fruity Maze that details how Susie, an MCI kid, passed away, with both of these spirits, Susie and Charlie, being present within FFPS. So this tells us that these minigames are being controlled by the spirits that fell victim to these incidents. And the FNaF 4 minigames are no different, as me and fellow theorists Fazent and Clipsy believe that these minigames take place on an arcade machine called Fredbear's Nom Nom Bits, as seen in Security Breach, fit with the same Fredbear sprite as seen in these minigames, creating an asset parallel for the spirit to manipulate, the spirit being Crying Child's retelling his story to the FNaF 4 protagonist many years later after his passing, which continues in some other minigames in Security Breach, such as Mangle's quest just being a literal arcade machine, and a final 3rd arcade we'll get into in just a moment. However, we can also confirm that Happiest Day has its own arcade machine thanks to Return to the Pit having Happiest Day occur on page 83, where Oswald gives cake to 5 children, thus stopping Pit Trap and freeing the spirits of the MCI, a literal parallel to Happiest Day in FNaF 3. Now we could talk about that final arcade machine in Security Breach that ties into one of the secret minigames in FNaF 3. In Security Breach, we could find a minigame in the daycare attendant's room called Balloon World, where we play as Balloon Boy, collecting balloons, and if we decide to investigate, we can get a glitched out version to get a secret ending for the this minigame. However, this isn't the only place where BB's Air Adventure pops up in an interesting way in FNaF. In the Into the Pit game, you can go up to this Freddy arcade once you have repaired it with the control panel found on top of a purple cloth in the present day. If you have a token with you, you can play this minigame and we are loaded in playing as Balloon Boy, jumping between platforms and collecting 5 hats. And once we collect these hats, we can leave. However, if we decide to investigate a little further, we can find a secret pathway after collecting these 5 hats that leads us to a dining area fit with 6 cakes, and further down the hallway, we find 4 balloon bundles that pop as we walk past them. The next room has Purple Guy with a 6th hat that we run towards to grab and save before Purple Guy drops it into the void below. If we successfully take the leap of faith and fall back to where we came from, we can complete the minigame with all 6 hats. Now, this applies to 6th MCI victim, but since all of the books got kicked into the stratosphere by Scott Cawthon and Steel Wool, we can just view this minigame as this universe's Balloon Boy's Air Adventure, due to it being fundamentally like BB's Air Adventure in FNaF 3, just with a twist, and we know it can't be 8-bit escape due to it not actually freeing the MCI, thus creating a perfect bridge into the next spirits and our franchise, the MCI. Now, before we explain the MCI, we need to really drive home to all that Charlie most likely died in the year 1982, as I know in this community we are strong believers of 1983 or 1987 right now. So I'm going to quickly provide some more evidence to this, as the puppet is very important to the MCI when it happens with them later on. So our first real mention of Charlie dying in the year of 1982 was actually from the Silver Eyes novel, where John and Charlie, who is in this story, is a robot recreation of Charlie, is looking into Charlie's brother's disappearance at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza that gives us an exact date as to when Charlie would have died, as it is found out that it was Charlie who was kidnapped and not her brother Sammy on pages 257, 258, and 259. Quote,
Sammy. We should have started with Sammy. We moved to the new house when I was 3. It's got to be 1982.
When's your birthday? May 13th.
How do you know?
Because I know things.
But why does it matter?
You remember being 3 when you moved, but you didn't turn 3 until May, so we knock out 5 months. Do you remember anything about the restaurant the night Sammy disappeared?
Charlie felt herself flinch with an almost physical pain.
John, I know when it was. She was a princess.
What? Who?
My mother. She was dressed up as a princess. It was a Halloween party. John, go to November 1st.
John struggled briefly with the controls, and then it was there. The headline was small, but it was on the front page of the paper on Monday, November 1st. Toddler snatched. Charlie turned away. John began to read aloud, and Charlie cut in, stopping him. This gives us a perfect timeline of events. Charlie was kidnapped on October 31st, 1982, and was reported missing on Monday, November 1st, 1982. However, we don't know how long it was until she was officially pronounced dead. And our only clue is using real-life sources for Utah, where these books take place, where it can take up to 5 years for this process to happen, which if true would mean she wouldn't be pronounced dead until 1987, the year FNaF 2 takes place, where Charlie is still possessing the puppet animatronic. And we could tie the MCI directly to Charlie's death due to Henry in the FNaF 2 movie telling us that the only reason he knows who murdered Charlie is when those 5 kids went missing, his business partner William Afton, as seen in this scene.
Everyone called it an accident. I had my suspicions about what had really happened, but it wasn't until years later when those 5 children went missing that I knew she was murdered by him.
And our last piece of evidence comes from the survival logbook that gives a direct timeline of events within FNaF, starting on page 17 with our first of 4 coupon related pages. This appears on the supposed night 1 of this book, and the top of the page says,
"Take your family out for a night of fun at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza,"
which specifically calls out the word out as a detail here, and as well as a mention of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, in which there's only one case of someone dying outside in FNaF in the first 4 games, Charlie. However, this connection doesn't stop here, as it continues onward to the next coupon page on page 31 on night 2 of this book that says,
"Take a bite out of fun on your next birthday,"
which specifically calls out the word bite, and we know this is referencing a birthday. And notice this quote doesn't mention a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, meaning that this bite happened at a location that wasn't a Freddy's on their birthday, and that would of course be the crying child. And as we continue, you'll notice that this is the only coupon quote to not mention Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. So we can continue with page 63, where the quote now says,
"Slice up some family fun at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza,"
which is obviously a call to the MCI, where we have seen time and time again through different medias that William Afton's favorite choice of weapon in the MCI is a knife. So it'd be fitting to call out the word slice when referring to the MCI, which happens at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The last one on page 79 tells us,
"Grand reopening. Join us at the new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza."
which ends our timeline with FNaF 2, the next big incident in the timeline with the bite of 87, occurring at the end of FNaF 2 and a direct callback to the grand reopening text as seen in the newspaper at the start of FNaF 2. What happened during the MCI? Well, we don't have too much information for it, as a lot of the missing children's stories have been left untold. However, we can piece together Susie's story, the kid who gets stuffed into Chica by the Fruity Maze minigame and FFPS. In Fruity Maze, each time you complete it, it begins to get more distorted and creepy, and on your third play of Fruity Maze, the collectibles are replaced by a dead dog with a yellow rabbit popping out of the ground and the girl's footsteps being red. As the timer ticks down, you start to hear a car alarm go off near the end, and once you fail, you see Susie staring back at you, and behind her is Spring Bonnie.
He's not really dead. He's over here. Follow me.
And that is how Susie is lured by William Afton and later killed in the MCI. However, we could tell you each kid's name and which suit they get stuffed into. We get the names of the MCI through the gravestones as seen in the Lore Keeper ending, where you have to play Security Puppet, Fruity Maze, and Midnight Motorist and get their secret minigames. And we have a total of 6 gravestones, 5 of which relate to the MCI. And when overlaid with either ending from FNaF 3's heads, we could find that Gabriel possesses Freddy, Fritz possesses Foxy, Susie possesses Chica, and Jeremy possesses Bonnie. With a mysterious 5th grade that had been overgrown by grass that we could find out is Cassidy due to the logbook on page 95 having a grid. Without explaining each step, you can fill out this grid by spelling out the alphabet to fill it in. And with numbers found throughout the logbook, you can find the name Cassie hidden within, which would belong to Golden Freddy. We can further confirm that Jeremy is Bonnie with the week before when Bronwyn confirms that Jeremy, aka Bonnie, got her on page 199, quote,
I bet you're wondering, well, why doesn't she do something? I did. I broke into the restaurant a few nights ago. Jeremy got me. Bonnie. Sorry about that mess.
We can also confirm that Susie is in Chica due to Ralph actually singing Happy Birthday to Susie, and when he gets to the part where you're supposed to say their name, he for some reason thinks of the name Susie, and Chica physically and verbally reacts to this, but we will dive into this more later in the video. So how do we get the specific date of June 26, 1985? Well, June 26 is quite easy to figure out, as in FNaF 1 we could find newspapers in the east corner camera, and one of these gives us a date detailing the MCI, June 26. However, the year 1985 is actually hard to figure out. There's a few sources that give us 1985 as a year. The first is when Charlie departed Utah in 1985 in the Silverized, quote, what did you expect? That the whole place would be unchanged? A monument to the moment of your departure frozen forever in July 1985? With 1985 being doubled down on in Into the Pit, a book where a character named Oswald gets put into 1985 to experience the MCI, quote, he had even caught sight of a calendar hanging in an open office that helped him pinpoint the date, 1985. And later with the Into the Pit game that has a calendar next to the Golden Freddy suit that says June 1985, with the MCI occurring just moments after seeing this calendar. However, all these are from non-canon material except for Into the Pit, where we were told to specifically use details from these books to fill in blanks from the past, and here we are being given June 1985 as a date for the MCI, with the 26th being given to us in FNaF 1. It creates a strong case for June 26, 1985 as the year the MCI takes place. Now, there's one thing I mentioned in my previous video going over Security Breach and other Steel Wolf FNaF games, and it was this balloon tower that had 5 colored balloons on it that matched with the balloon colors we find in Happiest Day, Fredbear's Family Diner, and BB's Air Adventure, being green, blue, purple, red, and a yellowish orange. I left this off on a cliffhanger as I didn't know what to make of it at the time until I decided to watch the FNaF 1 movie and found the answer to these 5 balloon colors. In the opening credit scene of the movie, we see William Afton in his iconic Spring Bonnie suit luring each of the MCI, and the first to go is Fritz. However, right after this, William gives Jeremy, Cassidy, Susie, and Gabriel balloons, and the colors are 1-to-1 the exact same as the balloons we had mentioned earlier, with Jeremy getting the green balloon, Cassie with the blue balloon, Susie with the purple balloon, and Gabriel with the red balloon. Then Spring Bonnie keeps what would have been Fritz's balloon being the yellowish orange one, which leads me to believe that these 5 colors are representative of the MCI. And when it comes to the factor of Happiest Day and the BB's Air Adventure, it adds up. BB's Air Adventure sets up Happiest Day, which directly involves the spirits from the MCI. Though for Fredbear's Family Diner to have those balloons is an interesting choice, and this is where I can believe that the MCI could have happened in 1983, before Charlie's death, due to the year 1983 being mentioned in the games, with the phrase existing during that time, whereas 1985 is actually never mentioned in the games, only in the books and the spin-off Into the Pit game. Though so much of Happiest Day mentioned here, I want to tackle who the receiver of Happiest Day actually is. We can figure this out through the layout of Happiest Day and how Happiest Day works in the Fazbear Frights novels, and I first want to establish how Happiest Day works in the first place. In the Fazbear Frights novel Blackbird, Jake is able to free Andrew using Jake's own Happiest Day, creating a possibility that another individual's memory could be given to another to create a Happiest Day for that other individual on pages 244 to 245. Quote, Jake focused again on his good memory, but this time it didn't loosen Andrew anymore. It just started taking Jake away from Andrew. Jake couldn't let that happen. He wasn't going to allow Andrew to be hurt anymore. Jake had to stay and fight. Blocking out anything good he'd ever felt, Jake anchored himself back into the animatronic. He faced the enemy in the compactor. As soon as Jake released his memory, the creature shifted its attention to Jake. Jake felt the creature claw at him. It felt like he was being mauled and pummeled by a force filled with a never-ending need to inflict pain, but he didn't give into it. Throwing everything he had into his effort and drawing on the power of his memory, Jake turned himself into a massive bat of attention, and he swung away, knocking Andrew loose from the evil that held him. Andrew, suddenly free, was sucked away, and he vanished. As with this connection, we can start to piece together who our Happiest Day receiver truly is. In Happiest Day, it's a flip of Fredbear's Family Diner, just missing a stage with creepy Springlock animatronics and fit with 4 kids wearing Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy masks, just not bullying the birthday kid, and balloons in the air. This is clearly Crying Child's birthday in 1983 from when he got bit, just minus all the things he hated, the creepy animatronics, the bullies, and subsequent lack of people in the 1983 minigames. As a complete 180 of that, and with these balloons being MCI colored, with the spirits of the MCI being present here, it starts to paint a picture that Crying Child's Happiest Day is being given to Cassidy via the puppet, MCI, and CC. And we can even see in the survival logbook that on page 31, we can find the puppet giving a girl with black hair cake, and above them is a prompt asking to reflect on the happiest day of your life. And in Return to the Pit on pages 83 and 84, it is detailed that the MCI are all at a table, and the last person to get a piece of cake is a girl with curly hair. Quote, as you serve the first piece of cake, you feel ridiculous, but for some reason, now you kind of feel like this is the right choice. It calms you down a bit, even as you sense the rabbit's imminent arrival. You continue to serve cake, 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 and final piece of cake to the girl with curly hair. You stand over the kids as in unison they all dig into their slices and take a bite. The kids are cheering. The word yay appears over their heads, and then a giant blue winner appears, meaning that in 2 different media sources, Cassie is the one to receive cake in Happiest Day, using Crying Child's memories of Fredbear's just altered to be happier, crying our Happiest Day receiver. Congratulations, Cassidy. So now that we have ghosts officially at play in our games, we have to explain how these spirits work and how they affect the environment around them. Most spirits are attached to metal or items that were important to them. In the case of Charlie, the MCI, and Crying Child, they all are attached to metal endoskeletons that they are possessing. This bondage of soul and metal is an alloy called Remnant that can be melted down and injected into other items or animatronics. This melted down material is described to be like bubbling liquid mercury, as told to us from a research report by Dr. Talbert in Fazbear Frights number 10, Friendly Faces, on page 251. Quote,
Remnant, according to the investigators who'd seen it, looked like bubbling liquid mercury, but no one knew what it did.
We further understand Remnant by what 2 things the soul can produce as a result of the way the person died. The first is normal soul, which is just the soul of the person, typically the good emotions they feel. Then there's agony, or dark soul I'll call it, something that is from the soul feeling negative emotions that typically shows as a dark oozing liquid that is stronger than the normal soul, as told to us in Fazbear Frights number 3, 1:35 AM on page 250. Quote,
as I expected, extreme human emotion appears to impact its surroundings far more powerfully the more negative it is. Agony, I'm convinced, radiates farther from people than any other emotion. Love has its influence, but the experiments being done with water crystals have been misinterpreted. Just because love forms beautiful ice crystals doesn't mean it's the most powerful emotion. Yesterday, I mimicked the ice crystal methodology, and by allowing all the hurt and anger I usually keep well in check to burst forth, I watched water manifest a hideous crystal in a matter of seconds.
With our last description of Remnant being told to us from Dr. Talbert, when Detective Larson goes to ask him what Remnant is after dealing with Eleanor, an agony-corrupted being, and for that, I'll let Dr. Talbert explain that to us coming from Fazbear Frights number 11, Prankster, on page 214. Quote,
there was just one more thing I wanted to clear up. It's out of my own personal curiosity, really. Remnant. What is it? Is it some kind of magic?
Remnant is, in non-scientific terms, it's like the metal is haunted. It's more complicated than that, of course, but it's similar to the way that water conducts electricity. Remnant is the mixing of the tangible with the intangible, of memory with the present, the people and things that are lost. It makes them almost real again.
So really what the soul is just a memory, and the present times reflecting those memories as even shown to us in the FNaF 2 movie, where Charlie is described to be in the last state she felt before she died, being rage, which is why she attacks everyone and has no problem with possibly killing an innocent child to achieve her goal. Then the remnant is just a combination of these memories and being combined into metal that bubbles as a liquid mercury-like substance that can be injected into other items for them to essentially be possessed, making an alloy between metal and memory. So how do we actually obtain the memories? Well, there's a huge explanation for that when it comes to the later entry of Sister Location, where fellow theorist T-Dreads pointed out that an audio file named Guts is used when Circus Baby is on the conveyor belt and Ennard is behind her. Before I play this audio, I want to give a warning and a timestamp for you to skip to if you aren't comfortable with squishy and bone crunching sounds. And what T-Dreads found out was in the Scooper blueprint, we were able to figure out how these memories are essentially farmed. This blueprint shows us that the Scooper has 4 features on it. The first one is A, excavating arm, which takes out something and holds onto it to be put into the final function. D, remnant reservoir, where it heats up what is taken out to be formed into remnant and sustained at the appropriate temperature to prevent it from being heated too much to where it becomes neutralized. Once what is scooped out is ready, whatever is scooped is then injected with remnant from the reservoir, making an essential constant loop for this process. But what exactly is being scooped here? Well, it'd be none other than the children that are kidnapped by the Fun Times, injecting them with remnant to keep them powered up, as remnant can act as a power source as long as it's replenished, and then providing more remnant to the machine to process the children's bodies and to be combined with metal, keeping it at that bubbling liquid mercury state to later be injected back into the Fun Times to keep their power going. And to further back this up, I found something that tells us exactly what this material smells like coming from Detective Larson and his battle with Eleanor from Prankster on page 202. Quote, Eleanor opened her mouth impossibly wide. Gooey black tendrils shot from it, slithered across the floor, then twisted around Larson, binding him. The tendrils were sticky and smelled like copper. Blood, thought Larson. They're made of blood. The black agony, a form of remnant, smells like blood. A telltale sign that for remnant to work is that it needs the bodies to be formed into the metal to be able to contain the memories from that body. That then acts out the last emotion it feels, such as Charlie feeling rage or the vengeful spirit feeling, well, vengeful, and so on and so forth. Well, now that we know how remnant works and what it is, how does it affect the area around it? Well, we know that the spirits can bring things out of your own mind, as told us from Michael Afton in the FNaF 2 movie, where he says this place will prey on your imagination if you let it. And it's said to us again in the previous book entry the week before, with Ralph, such as on page 36, where Ralph says that the guards' previous shifts are just seeing things bolstered by something they imagine. Quote, sometimes people fall asleep staring at the camera feed, and they imagine things, bolstered by the old rumors and stories. The mind can be a funny thing, and making it hard to distinguish hallucinations from reality. And he does this later on in the book in other routes, such as on pages 30 and 37, where he actually questions if what he's seeing and experiencing is because of similar reasons. And as we explain these hallucinations going forward by using these outside sources, you'll see just how truly powerful these children in these suits really are. So FNaF 2 has a lot to go through, and let's go through the first order of business with any FNaF game, which is figuring out who we play as, which we can find out through this game's paychecks as being Jeremy Fitzgerald for our night 1 through 6 gameplay, with a new guard on night 7 being Fritz Smith taking over for Jeremy once Jeremy swapped over to the day shift. Now, at first glance, it seems these characters are both just normal security guards, and to a lot of people, especially for Jeremy, is true, with Fritz Smith being Michael Afton, William Afton's son. However, with the release of the new Ticket to Fun F America kit, I actually want to take a second look at Fritz Smith and Jeremy Fitzgerald. Jeremy Fitzgerald is a normal security guard that works nights 1 through 6 in FNaF 2, and for the most part, yeah, he's just a normal security guard that just gets caught up in a lot of the horrible happenings of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. However, Jeremy actually does something on night 6 that starts to paint him in a more suspicious light. After working on night 5, we're told that we don't have to come in the next night, and that our shift is already going to be covered by a replacement that's still being searched for, as said by Ralph. Quote,
when we get it all sorted out, we may move you to the day shift. Our position just became available. We don't have a replacement for your shift yet, but we're working on it. We're going to try to contact the original restaurant owner. I think the name of the place was Red Bear's Family Diner or something like that.
However, on night 6, Jeremy still comes in regardless, even though he is not required to anyways, and Ralph questions what the heck Jeremy is doing there as the place is closed down for a while due to someone using a spare yellow suit from the back, causing the animatronics in the establishment to act up more than normal. Quote,
"What on earth are you doing there? Didn't you get the memo? The place is closed down, at least for a while. Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right. Listen, just finish your shift. Safer than trying to leave in the middle of the night."
And on this night, we get a huge hint as to what this yellow suit is, as on night 6 of FNaF 2, Withered Golden Freddy activates, whereas previous nights he had a chance to appear due to Scott's horrible programming, with starting at a 1 in 1,000 chance on night 2, and by the time we get to night 6, Withered Golden Freddy is finally ticked to active with a 1 in 10 chance, essentially at a 10 out of 20 on his aggression scale, with the previous night, night 5, having him be a 1 in 100 chance, nowhere near even activating a 1 out of 20 on aggression scale. However, this AI won't matter in a second, as regardless as if it was Spring Bonnie or Golden Freddy, the appearance of Golden Freddy on this night is quite interesting and will further set a standard for these phone calls. Take note on what Ralph calls this suit that was used, a spare yellow one. Now we know that these locations can prey on your imagination, and Golden Freddy appearing in the hallway as a giant head and fading away in your office if you successfully fight him off definitely screams hallucination to me. And this should clue us to who we are truly playing as, which is someone who would think of Golden Freddy when the description of a spare yellow suit is brought up and it isn't William, and most certainly isn't a random night guard. The only person who has a connection to this Golden Freddy suit is Michael Afton, a character we see throughout these games that is traumatized with his past around the suit in the Bite of 83, with Golden Freddy constantly appearing in ghostly ways in these games, such as teleporting to the FNaF 1 office, randomly appearing as Yendo in Sister Location, amongst other FNaF entries. And we can further confirm that Jeremy Fitzgerald is none other than Michael Afton with the Ticket to Fun Ephemera kit. This kit doesn't take place until after FNaF 1, presumably sometime around FNaF 3 due to this poster from FNaF 3 being present in the book, and Ralph's FNaF 1 phone call being referenced in this kit. However, I want to actually stop to take a look at what items you get in this kit, specifically the things on the left side of the kit when you open it. On the left side, you get 2 recipes from Fazbear Entertainment's past, the FNaF 1 newspaper clipping, some tickets with Toy Freddy on them, and Jeremy Fitzgerald's paycheck. And at first, this seems like a cool in-universe horror history kit. We can actually find out who owns this specific kit by looking at the crossword puzzle that is also given to us in this kit. If we decide to shine a blacklight on this crossword puzzle, we can find a lot of references to FNaF 1 and FNaF 2 here. However, if we direct your attention to the top corner of this puzzle, we can find that it says name. Mike Schmidt, the FNaF 1 guard that we can continue to piece together is Michael Afton due to him using the name Mike and not Michael in multiple FNaF games such as in Sister Location and in the Survival Logbook. Before you say, well, it's just a short name for Michael, which is true, we can actually find out that Michael Afton hates being called Mike in the FNaF 2 movie, where he specifically tells the Spectral Scoopers to call him Michael after they call him Mike. Now on night 7 we play as Fritz Smith, a guard who also shouldn't be here and is given no phone call from Ralph, and specifically to get the full 3-star ending in FNaF 2 you have to complete 420 mode, which is completely aggravating the Wizards minus Golden Freddy, the suits that contain the memory of the MCI, which is a peculiar detail as this means that Fritz needs a reason to specifically go and tamper with these suits only, and I believe we get our answer in Save Them. In Save Them, the puppet wakes up Withered Freddy to take him around the establishment that contains 5 dead bodies, constantly spelling out the words save and them. Every 30 seconds the game has a chance to just end abruptly, and during the time you have in this minigame, a few things can happen. First, that Golden Freddy can appear, and when you approach him he shines white pupils at you and fades away like he does in The Office. However, there's a 1 in 100 chance that purple guy, aka William Afton, will appear and attack Freddy, and when this happens, William has a message for Freddy: you can't. So let's take a deeper look into Save Them. First we have to figure out how these bodies got here and why, and our first clue is actually Toy Chica herself. In this minigame we can see the toys on stage, and after taking a closer look at Toy Chica, we can see that she is missing her beak, indicating that she has been in attack mode this night for some reason, giving us a clue that Toy Chica and possibly the toys had something to do with the incident that occurred within the pizzeria, meaning these 5 bodies had to enter after hours. And our next key is figuring out why these people came to the pizzeria, and we can figure this out by looking at a few sources within FNaF to find hints that point us to this being a breaking and entering incident, mainly coming from the Silver Eyes and the FNaF movie. In the Silver Eyes, Charlie and friends break into an old abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and are chased out by the animatronics, which granted isn't much right now, but begins a pattern of a break-in happening at a Freddy's at some point. We see this happen again in the FNaF movie, being shown to us 2 separate times. The first is when Steve Raglan, aka William William Afton is talking to Michael and mentions that the location has dealt with break-ins in the past, most of which just being homeless and drunk individuals. And later in the movie, we get shown a break-in consisting of 4 members, being Max, Jeff, Hank, and Carl. And during this, all 4 of them died to separate animatronics. However, there's one vandal that I want to point attention to, Carl. If you pay attention to Carl, he is the only character wearing something from an in-universe FNaF game, Midnight Motorist. And it's here where I believe we can start to piece our story together on what happened the night of Save Them and what Midnight Motorist is trying to tell us. So before we tackle Midnight Motorist, I want to cover what we know just from the minigame itself. The first we know is we play as a yellow man driving a purple car on a rainy night. We can go to a location called Junior's, which we are not allowed to enter in. There's a dirt mound that we can visit, which Yellow Man has nothing to say about it. Yellow Man has a home, and inside this home are 2 other people, a person wearing gray on the couch watching TV, and a child that we are aggressive to, and our child has ran away through his window to a location Yellow Man is aware of, and near the footprints of the kid are a pair of animatronic footprints. So at face value, we aren't told much, so we have to look to outside media sources to solve this minigame, and we should first try to figure out who Yellow Man actually is in the first place. Now, Yellow Man doesn't have many defining characteristics other than just being an aggressive, borderline abusive father. There's only one character that can fit this bill to our knowledge, William Afton. As we see William constantly aggressive and abusive to his children in both FNaF movies, and William Afton being Yellow Man is bolstered further with our dubiously canon 5 laps at Freddy's, where we can actually choose the car Yellow Man drives called the Midnight Motor, and fit on this purple car is a spring Bonnie antenna, the character William often associates with. So this helps us figure out that William Afton is Yellow Man. This now leads us to try to figure out what happened earlier that night in this minigame, and at first it's really hard to piece together until we take a look at Junior's. Junior's is a location with 5 cars outside and a singular green man that when approached tells us that we can't be there, and we know why that is, which is strange to be saying to William Afton, unless there was a specific point in time we could pinpoint when employees weren't allowed within a location, and there is. In FNaF 2's Night 5 phone call, we are told that we aren't allowed to let anyone in or out of the location, especially concerning any previous employees. A key detail to mention here, as we know, our Yellow Man, William Afton, is a previous employee at Fredbear's Family Diner and the 1985 location, and it's here where we can piece together that Midnight Motorist takes place around the time of FNaF 2 in 1987, further bolstered again by 5 laps at Freddy's due to the Midnight Motor having the numbers 8 and 7 on the dice, a number combination impossible to get on a typical 6-sided die, leading me to believe that Junior's is the FNaF 2 location, and this minigame likely takes place on night 5 before the night shift for that night begins. Next, we have to look at who our runaway is and where they ran off to. I feel it's quite explanatory. Michael Afton is our runaway, running to the FNaF 2 location again for another shift under the name given to him by his father. We can further piece this together as being Michael due to the similar characteristic traits of the runaway being rebellious and an angsty teen. And Michael is seen as being rebellious in FNaF 4 and is literally given an angsty teen voice in sister location despite not selecting that voice option, which then leads me to the footprints, and to figure this out, we have to answer what happened earlier in the night. And fellow theorists Freddy and T-Dreads pointed out that one of Candy Cadet's stories perfectly mirrors what happened earlier that night.
Now I will tell you a story about a kind man who would visit 5 orphans and bring them toys and gladness. The man lived alone and lived in fear that someone might break into the house of one of the 5 children, so he adopted all 5 and brought them together in one place in his own home. He promised them to never leave them, and they promised to always come home and never stay out too late. He left one day to buy food, his heart being filled with gladness, but returned to find that the burglar had chosen his home and killed all 5 of the children. The man could only afford one coffin, so he stitched the 5 bodies together to make one and buried the child. That night, there was a knock at the door.
What happened earlier this night was Yellow Man, William Afton, taking 5 bodies and putting them together in one coffin. And later that night, there was a knock at the door. And this knock at the door is heard in only one place in all of FNaF, Midnight Motorist, when we first go to greet our rotten son. And this leads us to now be able to piece together who these footprints belong to and where these 5 dead bodies came from. And for that, we can look to a few sources for where these 5 bodies came from. First is obviously the previously mentioned Save Them minigame, where it features 5 dead bodies that seemingly go missing and never mentioned again. Seems like a pretty good starting point. We can further use this in a later entry in Ultimate Custom Night, where again, Fred and T-Dreads point out that Toy Chica perfectly describes what happens in Midnight Motorist.
Look at those strings, those long, beautiful strings. He'll be mine by the end of the day. I just know it. I told him to come over later. That should be enough. And if he doesn't show up, I'll just go to his house. And if he doesn't open the door, I'll just find a window. Chimney's always an option. Or I could set the house on fire and wait for him to run out. Then he could run into my arms.
Toy Chica is talking about the puppet and referring to breaking a window to enter the puppet's home so that the puppet can be with her forever. And if you recall that the puppet is also a very important character to save them, which helps explain why the puppet is being chosen for this cutscene, referring to Midnight Motorist, but also begins my look into who left the footprints in Midnight Motorist, being either Toy Chica or Wither Chica. And for that, we can look further at Chica's weird placements everywhere with Midnight Motorist. Our first source of information with Chica and Midnight Motorist comes from the week before, where on night 3, page 100, Ralph climbs out of a broken window at the FNaF 1 location and is soon caught by Chica and taken further into the woods to an unknown location. Quote, "You race toward the broken window and catch Chica's reflection in a sliver of glass remain in the frame as you dive outside. You roll in the dirt, and shards of glass slice your hands, but you clamber to your feet and run away from the restaurant. You make it maybe 30 feet before something grabs you from behind. You tumble and see a blur of yellow fur and Chica's chicken feet. She's spattered in blood, but you aren't sure if it came from whoever broke into the restaurant or from you. You've always told the night watchman it isn't safe to leave in the middle of the night. It's better to wait until the end of their shift, but you didn't really know why. Just repeat what management told you, and they supposedly have a good reason for everything. This is what happens when you break the rules. If there's no evidence, it never happened. You think Chica's going to drag you back into the restaurant, but instead she carries you into the woods. This might go even more badly than you thought, for everyone. Implying that being brought into the woods by an animatronic is actually worse than being caught at Freddy's for everyone. And we can further figure out why this would be bad for everyone, as what happens to those taken by animatronics outside is shown to us in the FNaF movie, where 4 robbers break in, and when they first enter, we can see that one of them, Carl, is wearing a Midnight Motorist t-shirt. And at first, this seems like a cool Easter egg, until later on when Chica kills the person wearing this t-shirt. Another correlation with Chica and Midnight Motorist yet again. So this helps shorten our list for these footprints being Toy Chica or Wither Chica. And it's here where we have to really look close at what we have been told and whose feet match up with the toys. So first, let's look at this footprint, and we can see that the sole of the foot is a more rectangular shape with 3 spread toes standing out in the rain. This tells us that this animatronic needs this foot shape and needs to be able to stand outside in the rain without completely malfunctioning in terms of standing in the rain. Both Wither Chica and Toy Chica can do this due to in the FNaF 2 movie, we see the toys constantly around water and even submerged in the water with no issue. In the week before, we spray Chica with water and just doesn't have an effect on her. And you're probably screaming at me that, well, only the toys are fully submerged in water, and they're spring locks due to the Endo O2s being spring locks due to the 3 prongs on the rib cage and cage-like parts around the arms and legs. And as I say, you're right, we can also say the Wizards also use the Endo O2s, and we see this the best with Withered Foxy. So this means both Wither Chica and Toy Chica should have the waterproof spring locks to allow them to be in the rain, as we know that waterproof spring locks were developed in Seeker the Mimic spring locks log. So this shows that there are animatronics that can operate in the rain. So again, we're stumped on who out of Toy Chica and Wither Chica is our footprints. But I think we can still solve this by figuring out when Midnight Motorist happened and when Save Them happened. So far, we've pieced together that Midnight Motorist happens on night 5, due to this being the night where previous employees aren't allowed back into Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. However, we get a hint as to when Save Them happens on night 3, where Ralph tells us to ignore any rumors about what's going on outside of the establishment.
Oh, hey, before I go, I wanted to ease your mind about any rumors you might have heard lately. You know how these local stories come and go and seldom mean anything. I can personally assure you that whatever is going on out there, however tragic it may be, has nothing to do with our establishment. It's just all rumor and speculation, people trying to make a buck, you know. Our guard during the day has reported nothing unusual, and he's on watch from opening till close.
And notice how Ralph describes the situation as things happening outside and that nothing unusual has happened during the day, from opening until close, meaning the night hours are unwatched and unaccounted for. And unfortunately, we don't have a definitive time on when these establishments close for the night. However, this gives us time for Save Them to happen on night 2, and then for the rumors to start on day 3, for Ralph to tell us on night 3, and that's where we could finally rule out one of our chickens. If we head back to Candy Cadet's story about the 5 stitched bodies, we could find out that the man gave these 5 kids toys, but they were killed and later stitched together and put into one coffin. And this is where we get our conclusion that on night 2, the toys went out and kidnapped 5 people, brought them to the establishment while William wasn't there. And when William did arrive, he found 5 dead bodies for him to stitch together and bury, which is why 2 nights later on night 5, Yellow Man has nothing to say about the mound. It's still fresh in William's mind, and of course, William doesn't care about these 5. Considering with how he said to Withered Freddy, "You can't," when Withered Freddy tries tries to save the DCI. So this means Toy Chica was out on night 2, which gives us our last candidate, Withered Chica for Midnight Motorist, luring Michael back to the location on night 5 when no employees, especially previous employees, are allowed in the establishment. And when we take a closer look at Withered Chica's feet, her footprint would match up perfectly, as she has 3 spread toes, rectangular feet, and most importantly of all, her chicken claws are raised off the floor, meaning they wouldn't appear in the footprint left in the dirt. Now, I will say that doesn't completely rule out Toy Chica, but it makes her less likely than Withered Chica at the current moment. And with Save Them and Midnight Motorist figured out, it leaves us with one final mystery from this game. So what happened leading up to the bite of 87? Well, we aren't told much information, but we can figure out that an animatronic attacked a day shift guard, completely biting off his frontal lobe, as told was in FNaF 1's Night 1 phone call, quote,
they used to be allowed to walk around during the day too, but then there was the bite of 87. Yeah, it's amazing that the human body can live without the frontal lobe, you know?
Which is later doubled down on by Ralph again the week before on page 14, quote, if only the victim could tell what he did to provoke that attack, but he doesn't talk anymore, or do much else. So the press completely blew the incident out of proportion, and the place hasn't been the same since. And with these two pieces of information, we are now prompted with a few questions. First is, which animatronic bit this guard? The next is, what prompted the attack? Then lastly, who the victim is. And I have an answer for each of these questions. We can first start to decipher who caused the bite of 87 in a few lines from the week before that hints heavily at our culprit, who has never been any kids, specifically Foxy, on page 18. Quote, everything about this animatronic screams not for kids, which is probably why his attraction has been marked out of order for the reopening. Though as far as you know, he's never bitten any kids. And this is further bolstered by what was told to the guards after the bite of 87, in the case of any animatronics attacking again, which is by shining their flashlights into the eye of the animatronic on page 166. Quote, in the aftermath of the bite of 87, staff spread tips around the restaurant of how to slow or stop the animatronics if they ever attacked again. One of the survival strategies suggested at the time was shine a bright light into the animatronics' eyes to disorient them and temporarily lock them in position until they reset their sensors and recalibrated their programming. And we can further use this page to confirm that Chica is not a candidate due to the flashlight not working on her when she attacks on this page. And we can further bolster that Withered Foxy caused the bite of 87 due to the flashlight method being the only method in keeping him from killing you in FNaF 2. So with the combination as to Foxy being out of order, being that, well, he doesn't look kid friendly, but also because he has been an adult in the past, and the best way to keep Foxy at bay is by shining a light into his eyes, which is exactly what Fazbear Entertainment told employees to do after the bite of 87 in case an animatronic attacks. It checks off our first question, with our answer being Withered Foxy being the cause of the bite. So now we moved on to what prompted this attack. Well, we first have to remember that this attack occurred on day 7, the shift right after night 6. Now fortunately, whatever caused the attack is still a mystery to me, as much as it is to Ralph, as it seems in the universe of FNaF, no one actually knows what happened that led to the attack. Just that one moment everything was fine, and the next there was a guard without a frontal lobe with Withered Foxy standing over him. So wherever this attack happened had to have happened near parts and service for it to happen this fast. So now with 2 questions marked off, we can start to figure out who our victim is, and we have some details on what happened in the aftermath of this attack. First is that the victim lost their frontal lobe, if you recall from earlier being mentioned in the FNaF 1 Night 1 phone call. The other piece of information we have on this victim is that he doesn't do much of anything anymore. It seems to be in a vegetative state by FNaF 1 standards, as told to us on page 14 of the week before. So how can we piece together who our victim is from this? Well, we know that if Jeremy is Michael Afton, it can't be him, as Michael Afton is very alive and well by FNaF 1, meaning that our victim is most likely a random day guard, with this event being blown out of proportion by the press, causing Fazbear Entertainment to go into rapid decline, which leads us into the ancient and old FNaF 1 establishment and events after the toys are scrapped after this incident. So a lot happened here, so let's recap everything quick to make it easier to digest. We play as Jeremy Fitzgerald, a fake name given to Michael Afton by his father William Afton, selected as a reference to the MCI kid Jeremy who possesses Bonnie. We were able to figure this out by Michael Afton having Jeremy's paycheck and ticket to fun. This leads us to night 1. It's relatively normal besides the occasional animatronic roaming around. However, the next night before the start of our second night, the toy animatronics go out and lure 5 people to the establishment and kill them, where William Afton then comes to the establishment to clean up the mess. And then night 2 is also relatively normal. There's a little more moved from the animatronics this night, and it's day 3 where we start to get into the weird happenings as a result of the DCI. On night 3, Ralph tells us to ignore any rumors that we hear about the establishment, as whatever's going on outside of the location definitely has nothing to do with Fazbear Entertainment, and it's this first night where every withered animatronic activates to hunt down Michael. Michael survives, and the next day the location goes under investigation due to the rumors about these 5 people going missing in the middle of the night 2 nights prior. And it's here where Ralph specifically says that Fazbear Entertainment denies any wrongdoing and that the animatronics have grown aggressive towards the adults. Michael yet again survives, and thus brings us to day 5, where the location is on lockdown and no one is allowed in or out of the establishment, especially concerning any previous employees. And this is reflected on Midnight Motorist, where Yellow Man, who is William Afton, tries to go to Junior's as rejected by a random employee standing outside, saying that William knows why he can't be there right now and is turned away. Going to visit the dirt mound, we can figure this out to be the bodies of the DCI due to the story of a man who gave 5 kids toys to later find out all 5 kids died, and he had to stitch them together and put them in one coffin to be buried. William presumably did this before the start of our shift on night 5, where right as our shift starts, William goes back home to find that Michael has run off to the FNaF 2 location again, being lured by either Toy Chica or Withered Chica. Starting off night 5, and a pattern of us running off to the FNaF 2 location for night 6 when we aren't even supposed to be there, as the location is completely shut down. As previously stated, on night 5, Fazbear Entertainment would contact the original restaurant owner of Fredbear's Family Diner, being William Afton, for our replacement. We later find out our replacement is named Fritz Smith, another name of the MCI being Fritz, who possesses Foxy, which has a correlation to a yellow balloon that William keeps instead of giving to Fritz in the MCI, tying William Afton to Fritz Smith, the perfect way for William to get into the pizzeria and tamper with only the withered animatronics. On day 7, an incident occurs where, while Michael was working the day shift, a random patron or guard was bitten by withered Foxy and lost her frontal lobe in lightning speed, with no one knowing what happened to provoke the attack and leaving the victim in a vegetative state, never to be heard from again, leaving strategies to be used by guards in the case of another attack to flash a flashlight in the eyes of the animatronics. Wait, you actually thought I'd start with FNaF 1 itself? No. We're going a week before the week we play as Mike Schmidt and following the story of Ralph through his final week working at Fazbear Entertainment before he realizes. So, before we dive into the contents of this book, what's going on with Ralph? Well, we can confirm that he's a father to a singular daughter named Coppelia. It's unclear if the mother is still in the picture. Now, due to the sheer size of this book, I'm going to make a deep dive video separately on it. However, I will cover the most important bits, and we'll first tackle the layout of the FNaF 1 location, as what we get in FNaF 1 is not as accurate as we once thought it was. And to explain a lot of this book, we need to understand the layout of this location. So before we get into this, I'm going to go over 2 models that I have to show this new layout. The first was made by me in Minecraft to show in a more 3D sense, and the other is 2D that I got help from Windows System. The lime green parts are the vents to help break those up, and as we go through these locations, the map will update with new rooms and vents. So in the week before, we get information on 4 new rooms, the first 2 being the most difficult to pinpoint their location, being Party Room 1 and Party Room 2. Party Room 1 is pretty easy to figure out where it is, being the northeast section of the building, as on page 46, Ralph is being hunted by Bonnie near the kitchen, and we can dial the Party Room 1 phone number to lure Bonnie away from us, in which Ralph describes it as the ringing coming north of Ralph's location. Now, Party Room 2 is also somewhat easy, but due to conflicting information, can make it difficult to place, as it's either on the same side of the stage in the northeast corner or on the other side in the northwest corner. However, I'm placing the northwest corner due to a similar scenario occurring in this book where Ralph is stuck in the southeast corner of the dining area under a table with Bonnie hunting him, and we can call Party Room 2, and Ralph describes the location of the ring coming from the far end of the dining area from his location, meaning Party Room 2 is in the northwest corner. Now, Party Room 1 is described as having a window looking outside into the woods, and Party Room 2 does not have a window in it. Party Room 1 is described as looking similarly to the party rooms in FNaF 2 with 2 party tables inside, and Party Room 2 is described as looking identical to Party Room 1, just minus the window. They all have hats on them, presumably 5 due to the dining area only having 5 party hats on the tables as seen in the FNaF 1 game and described in this book. Party Room 2, however, has an interesting detail in it. If you decide to cheat in this book, you find a poster in Party Room 2 that says, "Let's party, you ready?" Something only seen on the Toy Freddy poster from FNaF 2, quote, "You close the door softly and switch on a light so you can see better. You look around and see a note pinned to the Freddy Fazbear poster marked, 'Let's party, you ready?'" So that's all the information we have on these 2 party rooms. So the next room we have is the break room, which is placed directly behind the main stage, and I believe this is to look exactly 1-to-1 with the pizza party room where we are behind the stage, because it's also described that there's a door from the break room that leads into a hallway that connects over to parts and service. Explain why Party Room 2 doesn't have a window, as there's a hallway blocking the view. And at Pizza Party, there is an employees only door leading directly to where parts and service would be in terms of direction. This leaves us with 1 more room and a huge ventilation system, so I'll get through this quick. Behind Foxy Stage is an area that's themed for a pirate adventure that has a scale in the corner with a vent cover behind it. And finally, the vent system. This vent system is huge, so we'll go to the right first and get through that side. The right side of the vent system is described as going through the kitchen and straight ahead that branches off to to the right or left, and to the right is a dead end that has a bone in it. Going left leads you to the breaker room from under the stage, and going forward will loop you back around to the office. The left side of the vent system, however, is interesting. It's described as having random offshoots and sometimes connects to rooms that are old and dusty, as if they're abandoned extensions of the location, and I'll explain these rooms in a second. If you don't get lost, you can go to Pirate's Cove through that vent that was in the corner as described earlier, and going forward past that leads you back to the break room, creating a big loop. I've also placed a safe room northeast of the establishment connecting from the restroom hallway, as in Follow Me, that's the location of the safe room. Okay, cool. We got the layout done, so let's explain those random rooms that Ralph comes across quick. So I believe these rooms are in the southwest of the establishment by the supply closet, and why is this? Well, I, alongside Fazent, Dual Process Theory, and Shizue, discovered that the Follow Me map and the Save the map line up perfectly, leaving out the two party rooms on the left of the main hall from FNaF 2. But what really proves it for us is when you line up these maps, the parts that have checkerboard patterns and the parts that don't also line up perfectly one-to-one, leaving out the FNaF 2 stage area as a party room 1, and the two party rooms left of the hallway being left over right outside of the supply closet, as well with vents connecting to them but have been left abandoned and collecting dust. Now that we have everything laid out, we can finally get into the cool stuff with this book, and let's first dive into the story of Bronwyn Light, a field reporter that originally applied to a job for this location that eventually broke in on night 3, but we don't see until night 5. Now, how Bronwyn breaks in is actually important to what happens later in the story, as it directly leads to the possibility of that scene with Chica taking Ralph into the woods after he jumps out a shattered window. Bronwyn Light broke into the establishment before Ralph shift through the window in Party Room 1. And as Bronwyn climbed in, she was caught by Bonnie, as described to us on night 5, page 199, from Bronwyn, quote,
I bet you're wondering, well, why doesn't she do something? I did. I tried. I broke into the restaurant a few nights ago. Jeremy got me. Bonnie. Sorry about that mess.
And in case you're worrying about what the mess was, it's a giant blood puddle near the broken window in Party Room 1 that Ralph had to clean up on night 3. And now you're probably wondering that if Bronwyn is dead, how is she reaching out to Ralph 2 nights later? And well, we get that answer on night 6, where Ralph finds Bronwyn in the break room stuffed inside of a Freddy suit from the Fredbear's days on page 206 and 227, quote, with trembling fingers you try to remove the head, but it's stuck fast. Flies swarm around you, buzzing and brushing against your face and hands. You squint your eyes and hold your breath against the putrid scent of rot. You try twisting the head from side to side, and it starts to give. You gradually work it all the way around, and something dark and thick oozes from the neck seam. You peer through the dark eye holes and get a glimpse of what's inside. You see a body with a name tag, Bronwyn, or what's left of her, end quote. So yeah, Bronwyn on night 5 reached out to Ralph through the office via her memory, something we see the MCI do in FNaF 1 on night 5 and in the FNaF movie in multiple situations, and when we discover Bronwyn's body, we can take her cell phone and use it on previous nights, such as calling Party Rooms 1 and 2 on night 1, and this phone is how Ralph records the FNaF 1 phone calls for us the next week, with Ralph recording these due to him now knowing the truth behind the location and its history with the MCI. And we are told he specifically left clues to us to explain what was happening without Fazbear Entertainment picking up on what Ralph was trying to do on page 45. You're feeling a bit nostalgic and thinking about your legacy as the phone guy, so you decide to leave a message for the next person in this chair. Only this time, you want to tell them the truth, everything they need to know to make it here. Well, not everything. Management screens these messages, so you have to insert some strong hints. You run through the introductory greeting they always make you read, and then touch on some important details, like how the animatronics will be on the move, and how to engage with them, or rather, not engage with them. That endoskeleton stuff, all things they should really tell you when you sign up, end quote. So Ralph is specifically telling us that each phone call he left us from his 5 nights has strong hints about the lore of Fazbear Entertainment and what's going on. Also, if you're wondering, our night 4 phone call is Ralph's night 5, as he forgets to record a message on night 4. So with us having this information, let's take a look at these 4 phone calls from Ralph and see what we could piece together from his shifts. And honestly, there isn't much. He references things he experienced in his week on night 1, with explaining to us that if we get caught, we'll be stuffed into a Freddy Fazbear suit. And on night 3, he hints that every past night guard has died, but corrects his implication immediately. He recommends to play dead, but then retracts that statement, as then the animatronics may try to put an endoskeleton in you. Then lastly, night 4's phone call, which is Ralph's night 5, is where Ralph mentions to check the heads in the back room, a room we aren't told of in the week before and never see in game. So odds are it leads us to the one room full of animatronic heads and parts in service, as that's that's where Ralph is likely going to be stuffed. However, he sadly is stuffed in the area behind the stage behind the break room, as we are given a description to the area where Ralph is stuffed on page 187, quote, "When you come to, how, it's dark. You can't move your head, but through two small eye holes you can just make out what happens to be the repair shop behind the stage. I'm okay, you wonder? Something smells bad. It might be you. It's me. Why can't you move your head? Your hands. I'm not okay. All your choices have led you here, and now you're out of options. The only thing you can do is wait." And it's here where we have to answer who killed Ralph, and ironically, it was everyone. On page 187 again, what happens right as Ralph dies is explained to us, quote, "You turn around thinking Foxy has rebooted himself, but then you see what's behind him. Freddy Fazbear. Something moans. Is it you?" The animatronics scream, all of them. The doors in the office pop open and the camera feed cuts out. The monitor spews static and snow dances across the screen. The phone line goes dead. So the doors opened and Bonnie, Freddy, and Chica killed Ralph, with Foxy maybe being a part of it, as he says that he thinks Foxy rebooted himself after Ralph attacked Foxy, but doesn't actually say if Foxy's up and rebooted. This now leads us to our last question for FNaF 1. If Ralph finished his night shift but then went back in time, how is he giving us these messages if he's dead? Well, luckily for us, the answer lies in Bronwyn Light and what Ralph does after he is stuffed. When Bronwyn calls Ralph, it's implied that she isn't dead, but in her last dying moments on page 200, as she tells us that she has been holding on for as long as she can, but can't make it any longer. And later on page 206, we could find Bronwyn's phone that we used to record these messages still in her hand. And it's here where we take Bronwyn's phone that we later go back to night 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to record messages for the next night guard. And the way Ralph's final moments are described to the player of him also being stuffed in the breaker room where Bronwyn would be, and word for word his last moments are the exact same as Bronwyn's, quote, "All your choices have led you here, and now you're out of options. The only thing you can do is wait." Ralph is still alive with Bronwyn's phone on him, waiting for someone to find him, and this is exactly what Ralph tells us he's going to do on the night 4 phone call, quote,
"I'm gonna try to hold out until someone checks. Maybe it won't be so bad."
Ralph is holding out just like Bronwyn did from Ralph's night 3 to night 5 until someone checks the backroom area. However, nobody does, as he describes the parts and service area and not the breaker room, forcing him to talk to us each night using the memory of his nights in these phone calls to help us survive our 5 nights and not meet a similar fate to Ralph. This also helps explain why Ralph is literally seen as a phone in Ultimate Custom Night and not a human stuffed in a suit. And it's with Ralph's death that opens a new question, with him being forced to replay his nights to give us messages with Bronwyn's phone, his hallucinations. On multiple pages throughout the book, Ralph sees hallucinations that we also see during our week in FNaF 1, with the majority occurring on page 180, where Ralph is in a literal staring contest with Freddy, and as he is staring at Freddy, Freddy begins to place a bunch of Easter egg items near himself to distract Ralph so Freddy can get into the office. Quote, "You choose to fight. In this instance, it means locking your eyes on that monitor and watching Freddy. As long as you're looking at him and his song is playing, you don't think he will attack. You blink as little as possible, though your eyes are burning and blurring with tears. It seems each time you do, the posters on the wall change. One moment, there's a list of restaurant rules behind Freddy. The next, it's a newspaper page showing a headline about missing children. You want to read it, but you know the moment you shift your focus to anything other than Freddy, you'll be lost. But he keeps trying. You know it has to be Freddy's doing, whether he is somehow changing what's on the walls or merely your perception of them. Blink. Now you're looking at sad, scary children's drawings that make you feel simultaneously vulnerable and malevolent, as if you are both a victim and perpetrator of some horrible crimes. This isn't who you truly are. It's this place." Freddy specifically using these hallucinations to distract Ralph so that Freddy can kill him, and that's where this pattern continues with Foxy's sign in Pirate's Cove, saying "it's me" instead of the normal out of order sign, something that Ralph also experiences in the week before and almost gets him killed as a result, barely giving him time to react to Foxy charging down the hall. Every hallucination we see in FNaF 1, and quite possibly subsequent games, are creations of the spirits to distract us, to give them more time and opportunity to kill us. Even though these hallucinations hold true to the story, to them it won't matter if you know, as by the time you're done registering what is there, you're already dead. Now, FNaF 3 is actually quite easy to figure out when it takes place. All it requires is a little math and keen eyes for red text on a slightly darker red background. And before we actually dive into this, we have to explain the survival logbook and when it takes place in the FNaF timeline. On page 79 of the logbook, we could find a coupon for $16, and on it, Michael writes, quote, "For real value, see page 61. Where on this page, we could find a math equation on a whiteboard, parentheses 5 plus 4, 3, me to multiply. So with this, we get 9 times 3 to then get 26. 1987, making this coupon in modern day worth $27. But from what point in the timeline is this referring to? Well, we have two options to look here. We can start from FNaF 2 in 1987 and see the inflation for that, or the FNaF 1 location, which we don't have a definitive date on. However, I think we can actually solve FNaF 1's date in the timeline quite easily through this. FNaF 1 has 2 years that are majorly debated in the community, 1992 and 1993, with both years having great evidence to them. So let's plug these 2 years into our inflation calculator, and we get 2015 for 1992 and 2017 for 1993. But how can we piece together the actual year for FNaF 1 in this? Well, I think the FNaF 3 Steam description can help us, where it described that FNaF 3 takes place 30 years after the closure of a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location, and the owners are trying to revive the now legends of the Fazbear Entertainment brand and make their horror attraction as authentic as possible. When looking at what they're trying to show us in FNaF 3, it helps us paint together what happened 30 years prior to FNaF 3. The Fazbear Frights attraction shows us both items from FNaF 1 and 2, but also has tapes from the 1985 MCI location that tells us when Springlock suits stopped being used once there was a multiple simultaneous Springlock failure at a sister location, placing the earliest item in this horror attraction from 1985 during the week of the MCI. And we cannot leave this date behind, as if we choose the 1987 location as our 30 years point, we have to ignore the MCI and Ralph's recordings from 1985. If we go even further with just saying it was the FNaF 1 location, we then have to continue to ignore the MCI, DCI, and Bite of 87, leaving only William Springlocking as a legend they are referring to here. So without ignoring any possible legends here, FNaF 3 taking place 30 years after the MCI, and FNaF 1 in 1992 places FNaF 3 in 2015, which then leads us to ask when the logbook occurs in relation to FNaF 3, as it could take place before, during, or after FNaF 3. Well, we could flat out confirm it takes place during or after FNaF 3, as the FNaF 3 office is shown multiple times throughout the book. However, how can we confirm exactly when around FNaF 3 this takes place? Well, we the reader get this book after FNaF 3, likely from the auction mentioned in the newspaper after Night 6 in FNaF 3. But this isn't really important to us. When did Michael Afton have this book, and when was he writing in it? Well, this is actually quite difficult for us to figure out, as there isn't really any deciding factors. However, I decided to look at Michael Afton's character in this logbook, and I was able to at least piece together one thing that may be able to help us out here. This logbook is split up into 5 nights, with each night having their own theme to them. However, Michael Afton has a near character 180 turn between night 1 and night 2. On night 1, Michael is only shown being dreadful a total of 1 time on page 12, where he crosses out the word success for survival. However, in terms of normal drawings and jokes occurring a total of 4 times on pages 6, 14, 15, and 16, showing a more laid-back personality but still on alert from time to time. This laid-back personality was reflected on the cover art for this night, showing Night Guard Foxy just sitting down reading a newspaper. However, on night 2, Michael almost does a character 180 turn. Michael's only shown with this laid-back personality 2 times this night on pages 29 and 34. It shows his paranoid side a whopping total of 5 times on pages 30, 31, 32, 37, 38, and 41. A near 180 contrast from his laid-back night 1 personality to being more paranoid and creeped out. That's also shown in the cover for night 2, with Night Guard Foxy on his feet shining his light at something in the office. So why would Michael be stressed out on night 2 of this book? Well, maybe it's because on night 2 of FNaF 3, the rotting corpse of his father just so happens to be walking around and hunting him down. That could do it. In the Frights book called Gumdrop Angel, with the story What We Found, where Hudson actively becomes more paranoid when Springtrap arrives, and on his showdown with Springtrap begins preying on his past traumas, something seen with instances of his love interest, abusive teacher, and other pieces of trauma from Hudson's past. However, Hudson has a full breakdown when Springtrap actually speaks to Hudson, mimicking Hudson's abusive stepfather Lewis on page 213, quote, "You're nothing but smoke. You're nothing at all. Go away." Hudson begged the voice. He knew it wasn't going to go away, so he wasn't surprised when he heard the Lewis voice say again, "Nothing at all." He was surprised, though, when he turned toward the sound and saw the decayed rabbit animatronic shuffling down the hall toward him, staring intently at Hudson. The thing's mouth was moving. "Nothing," it said. "Less than nothing. Nothing but smoke." And again, "Nothing. Less than nothing. Nothing but smoke." Showing that with Hudson, his stepfather is a touchy point for him, as shown in pretty much the whole story of What We Found. And it's reflected on this night of the logbook, showing that Michael had a few nerves touched when he saw his father William inside of Springtrap. However, unfortunately for Hudson, he doesn't make it past this night and is burned alive in an oven by Springtrap. Though this begs the question, if Hudson is a parallel to Michael, could it be possible that Michael isn't William's son but rather stepson? Well, I'll save that for another day, but thought I'd give some food for thought. Back to the logbook, later on in night 3, 4, and 5, Michael slowly starts to gain his confidence, with one sign of stress chewing on page 49 and one drawing that's quite normal on page 62. Then night 4, Michael completely has a confidence boost to the extreme with a total of 2 drawings that are quite goofy on pages 73 and 84, and a total of 2 normal or joking remarks on pages 79 and 87, which continues into night 5 with 2 goofy drawings on page 92 and 101, with the amount of jokes going down by 1 on page 99. So Michael is specifically only paranoid to the extreme on night 2. That feels like a telltale sign that this book takes place at the same time of FNaF 3. But then another issue arises. Are they before, during, or after these nights? Well, our only detail is the time marked on night 5's event log, where he writes in the time slot 8:11, with no telltale sign of when this was, but my suspicion is that it's most likely that he's filling this out after night 5 at 8:11 a.m., which means he's likely drawing and writing this book during his night or a little before. However, why certain drawings were drawn during the night can be explained further with the most nightmarish FNaF game of them all. Wait, FNaF 4 again? Alright, well, there's a few things to explain here, as most people tend to place FNaF 4 at the same time as the minigames in 1983. When looking further at FNaF 4, we can get a good look as to when FNaF 4 takes place, and at first glance, yeah, this game is just about a kid inside a house being hunted by 4 nightmarish animatronics, but looking into the dark corners reveals some secrets that are key to figuring out when FNaF 4 takes place, and our first clue is the mechanics of all of the nightmares. In FNaF 4, we were being hunted by the nightmarish versions of the FNaF 1 classics, and they all have mechanics that reflect how they act in FNaF 1, with Nightmare Bonnie in the west hallway, Nightmare Chica in the east hallway, Nightmare Foxy requiring attention in the closet, and Nightmare Freddy operating in pure darkness at all times to attack you, with the FNaF 1 Night 1 phone call sometimes playing in a distorted manner throughout each night, which means this has to take place during or around FNaF 1, right? Well, not quite, as there's another character in this game that places it closer to FNaF 3, Plushtrap, which is based off of what Crying Child saw outside of Fredbear's family diner in the minigames we mentioned at the beginning of the video, just a more nightmarish version. So who do we play as? Well, I believe it to be Michael, since the main night gameplay is a literal recreation of FNaF 1, even including a FNaF 1 phone call throughout the night, and it's further backed up in the logbook, where you can also figure out where in the timeline FNaF 4 takes place. The survival logbook is a book with a lot of mysteries within it, with the start of each night showcasing the FNaF 3 office, showing us that this takes place around the time of FNaF 3, and specifically on night 2 of this book, Michael Afton draws on page 41 either Nightmare Fredbear or Nightmare, and luckily I think I know who this is. A user in my Discord server, Red Rex, pointed out that the drawing from the logbook might be referencing this teaser back when FNaF 4 was first being teased, with the hat and bow tie of Nightmare Fredbear, and as though this drawing has its bow tie, it is missing its hat, giving us a closer connection to Nightmare Fredbear through this teaser than Nightmare himself. If you want to go even further, in the extras menu of FNaF 4, you can see in the final image for the making of Fredbear, Fredbear is missing his top hat. The only instance we see a character that looks like this drawing missing their hat. But now we have the issue as to when Michael experienced this FNaF 4 night, as it can't be from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. And it's here where the story, What We Found, comes in to help us figure out when Michael is actually asleep. Hudson only has 2 night shifts in this book, with his second night ending in his death, so we only get 1 night where Hudson actually goes to bed. Though to describe Hudson as a character, he's laid back but sometimes has PTSD trauma and could struggle to sleep from time to time. However, after his first night shift at Fazbear Frights, Hudson actually decides to go and visit his grandma before his shift, and it's here where it's described when Hudson goes to sleep. Quote, "That night at Fazbear's Frights passed without incident, and Hudson was so relaxed when he went home after his shift that he actually went to sleep and stayed asleep for 5 hours. Hudson on night 1 is thoroughly relaxed and is even able to sleep comfortably for 5 hours, which is actually a huge achievement for people who have severe mental trauma. Though being thoroughly relaxed on their first night sounds similar to someone we know from the logbook, Michael Afton, and ironically on night 2 for Hudson, he is beyond paranoid for no reason other than Springtrap is now in the building. Wonder where we saw that happening. Anyways, now that we know when Hudson, or in our game's case, Michael, is sleeping, which is nearly right after his night shift, placing FNaF 4's nights the day of the night, so FNaF 4's night 5 occurs on day 2 of FNaF 3, and so on and so forth, similar to how Ralph's phone calls work in FNaF 2, now leaves us to ask ourselves, for how long was Michael working here, as in What We Found, Hudson worked the day shift before he had to take over for the current night guard, Virgil. Well, in night 2 of the logbook, we mentioned how Nightmare Fredbear is drawn, which to me screams that this is the first time Nightmare Fredbear appears in FNaF 4, which is night 5, meaning that night 5 of FNaF 4 is on night 2 of FNaF 3, placing night 4 on night 1, and nights 3, 2, and 1 before FNaF 3, meaning Michael has been working here for at least 3 days or nights before our night shifts start in FNaF 3, which continues to line up perfectly for us, as on night 1 of FNaF 3, Phone Dude has this to say to us.
Hey, glad you came
Glad you came back for another night. Michael Afton has been working at Fazbear's Frights for a few nights before the start of the week we play in FNaF 3, which helps line up as to why FNaF 4 and FNaF 3 are so intertwined with one another, as they begin to overlap on night 4 of FNaF 4, and ironically, FNaF 4's final night, 420, being night 8, would be night 5 in FNaF 3, the night before the place is burnt down, with Nightmare first appearing on night 4 of FNaF 3, so with all this information, this leaves one huge mystery left. Night 7 occurs on day 4 of FNaF 3, leaving the box as the last thing we could see before night 4 of FNaF 3. And it's here where we can connect this box further, as it appears on night 5 of the logbook, FNaF 3's night 5. So as you may have noticed this whole video, I have ignored this box, trying my best not to talk about it, and well, it's because I have a good idea as to what's in it. Here, come with me. Alright, welcome. Now before I open the box, I want you to imagine what's in this box. Is it maybe a golden Freddy mask? Maybe something metaphorical, like a shattered picture. Or it's something for the next game, like a part of Circus Baby. Alright, you got it pictured? Good. Let's open the box then, shall we? It's nothing? But how can it be nothing? Well, remember how I mentioned that the box in FNaF 4 that appears on night 7 would be appearing on day 4 of FNaF 3, right before night 4? Well, I decided to take a deeper look into FNaF 4 and the logbook. And in FNaF 4, the original way to open the box was to beat night 8. However, Scott scrapped this to keep the box's contents hidden as seen in the codes of FNaF 4. And to quickly explain this line of code, we first need to establish that there's 15 lines of code that leads to opening the box. The first image shows the code for what nights need to be beaten to obtain the box cutscene, needing a value of greater than or equal to 7 or 8, this being night 7 and 8 in FNaF 4. The next image shows how the box opens, moving the locks and the amount of actions required to obtain this, with the final image showing how the box fully opens on night 8. However, there's a major issue here. The box doesn't appear on night 8, making this scrapped content, right? Well, what if Scott repurposed this idea in the logbook, leaving night 8 with an open box on day 5 of FNaF 3? Well, on night 5, and specifically on pages 106 and 107 of the logbook, the last thing we ever see in this book before we have to fill out our normal night report shows us a box with nothing in it. It's here where I decided to take a look at what Scott Cawthon himself said about the FNaF 4 box and its contents back on August 24th, 2015. Quote,
"What's in the box? It's the pieces put together, but the bigger question is, would the community accept it that way? The fact that the pieces have remained elusive this time strikes me as incredible and special. A fitting conclusion in some ways, and because of that, I've decided that maybe some things are best left forgotten forever."
Scott Cawthon says it's the pieces put together, and says that even though we haven't figured out anything with FNaF 4 at the time, it's still a fitting conclusion as to what this box was going to have in it, leaving its contents left forgotten forever. That's where I want to look at the line of "it's the pieces put together," I mean that once we have every piece, we would know what's in the box. A callback to the 4 games 1 story teaser, and with Scott Cawthon hinting to us that not knowing what's in the box is a fitting conclusion, it leads me to ask this question: if you have all the puzzle pieces, what's left in the puzzle box? Nothing. The contents of the box have been obtained and connected, and it's here where that fitting conclusion works. Having nothing and the lack of knowledge of what is inside the box shares the exact same message. There's nothing more to tell for FNaF 1 through 4, and now it's best for us to leave some things forgotten forever. Even if we didn't have all the pieces, sometimes letting go is the answer to everything. After all, isn't that what Happiest Day is? Letting go of what wrongs have been done to you, but now for us to let go of the one thing we love most, which is this goofy bear game? Well, that's for us to decide.
It has been much too long since I put on my skin. They must have hid it away when they found out where I'd been. I don't think you belong. You'd best get out of here. I see you
won't die.
away through the window, drenched with fear. Getting hard to see.
T. Y. O. U. R. S. O. U.